Hi, welcome to the podcast A Little Bit Minded. My name is Roberto.
I'm Alejandro.
And my name is Eric.
And today we'll be talking about evolution.
So, we've been waiting to make a video on the topic of evolution, and today is the day we decided to make it. And in the world, we have many examples of evolution. Like, one of the prime examples, one of the first examples that we ever knew about was when Charles Darwin voyaged to the Galapagos Islands, and he found many animals that were similar species, but they had different traits. Like, for example, one of them was the Galapagos tortoise, and he found that there's some tortoises that had like a pretty basic looking shell. Like, it wasn't that different from other tortoises, and he saw other tortoises that had like an arch on their shell, and that arch primarily helped them to reach vegetation that was taller, and so that'd be like some tall bushes or shrubs. The ones with the more normal shells were like mainly ate like low-lying vegetation. And what do you know about evolution?
Well, I know how Charles Darwin developed the natural selection theory. So how basically, depending on the creature's traits, they could produce the more viable offspring. So offspring that would be fit and would be able to produce more. And at the same time, their survival is a lot more efficient than other creatures. So, and also how sexual selection. So, how different creatures look for their more viable mate, so they could create offspring depending on traits, sexual traits. So like maybe the color of their feathers, like the bowerbird. I don't know if you heard about the bowerbird. How like it's a round bird, and the male it's pretty big. So the female, what she does, she looks for a mate who builds the most best looking nest, and the nest is basically round. It usually lies around the water, or like around the little pond. So the male, what he does, he finds a bunch of he goes around looking for flowers, maybe looking for rocks, or just cool looking leaves that he finds around, and he puts it on the nest. And the nest that looks the best, the nest that looks the most beautiful, that's the nest that the female chooses. So she ends up staying with that mate, and producing offspring. So
Yeah, like I know Charles Darwin too. He thought like on his diary when he was traveling around the world, he was just like illustrating like the different like beaks on finches and all that stuff too. So like there'll be finches that, let's say, are more, their beak is evolved more just to like get insects, so like a sharper beak, or if not like a sort of like curved or bigger one to actually crush the like nuts or stuff that they find. So it's just pretty much they evolved into like to be more efficient to eat whatever like and they're primarily eating.
And the thing is that there were the same species of bird, the finches, the Galapagos finches, and how basically each creature had a different, not each creature, but each creature from their family had a different sized beak for just different functions. So like you said, breaking maybe like a bigger beak for breaking bigger nuts that have a thicker shell. So,
or not like more muscle on your jaw in order to crush it too.
And also I found a tree or like a graph that talks about like the different abilities of the finches, and we see that there's like some finches, like the woodpecker finch on the in the Galapagos Island that was able to basically peck the wood, and they would pick out the grubs from the trees.
Yeah, so like basically like rotting trees and all that stuff. These insects tend to be more like in like let's say trunks that are like dying. So yeah, like since it's like moist and all that stuff, I'm like the insects will be in there, and if you're able to like break through that like I don't know like barrier of like dying wood, you'll be able to reach that insect in there too. And then I know there's this like I think there's this like sort of like monkey looking thing. Has like big eyeballs. And it evolved to have like a really long finger, where it just taps on the wood to see if it's hollow. And of course, like on the end of that finger, he has like a claw that would reach in there. It's really long. His finger's really long, and reach in there, grab the insect, and eat it.
I think you're talking about the ayay.
I'm not sure exactly where it is, but
Yeah, I searched it up right now.
yeah, it's a pretty creepy looking animal because of his big eyeballs.
Yeah, I have searched up a picture of it right now, and you see he has like a very long middle finger.
Mm-hmm. It's like a very long finger, and it's used for that. Like it's used for like a hook, or if not, like just to tap on the wood.
Yeah, I've seen this one like I think in documentaries. Also, it's pretty creepy.
Like I don't know if you heard how when Charles Darwin discovered the peacock, how he had a difficulty understanding its physical traits. How it has a bunch of feathers and it's very colorful. And one thing he had a problem with is that like how this all those feathers didn't allow the bird to be so fit to be able to survive under when it's in a situation against a predator. So the thing is that like the feathers, since it has so many feathers, it makes the bird very heavy. So like if it tries to fly, it can't fly so high or it can't fly so far. And they did studies how like they began to cut pieces off the peacock's feathers, and it turns out that once you put them in a group with females with female peacocks, it's the male peacock has a lot more trouble finding a mate.
Mm-hmm.
For the reason of sexual selection. How the female finds the male peacock more attractive if he has more feathers, if they could see more of his color. So because I mean that's the reason why I guess that's why the peacock opens its feathers to attract a female.
No, but I think if I remember well, I'm not sure if it's true, but I remember hearing that the male peacock, since it has so many feathers, and like in those feathers, like some of those feathers look like if there's eyeballs, so like it'll tend to confuse predators too. So like let's say they see the peacock opening their I don't know, their tail or whatever it is, they won't know what to attack because they see multiple eyeballs.
Yeah, it works as it works as a defense mechanism, but like what I was saying is that how Charles Darwin had a difficulty understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like basically they're trading off like let's say functionality. I think they're trading like function over I don't know like in order like more to be appealing to females instead. So yeah, like they're losing more of a survival trait, I think, in a way.
Well, they're more dependent on sexual selection than
surviving.
Yeah.
Also, I've seen that tigers, they also have a white spot on their ears, and they trick other animals into thinking that they're looking at them, but they're really not. Just the spots.
And then I think it's like evolution is not only with animals, it's with plants too. Like I know pretty much all the chilies all the chilies basically evolved to be spicy. So like they say animals like humans and other animals like won't like the chili because of like how spicy it is. They think it's dangerous because it hurts them. But if you see, like, the chilies basically evolved to be only eaten by birds. Like the birds, they don't have that, like, I don't know, they don't have that like sensory thing that feels like the spiciness of chili. And so basically, if the chilies want to survive in a way, like the birds would actually come, and since they fly out to like different places, their droppings will have the seeds. Because I think a lot of animals or humans will digest the seeds too, but birds don't digest the seeds. So their droppings are actually gonna have the seeds in there. Unlike, let's say, if we eat a chili, um, whenever we go to the restroom, the the seeds are not gonna be in there. Or let's say if dogs or other animals too. And then yeah, since like birds can't really feel like the spiciness, of course they're gonna go over there and eat more chilies because it's food. It's food, and then since they're flying off to like different places, they're gonna be they're gonna spread the chilies like in a further area than if animals actually did, because we tend to stay in a certain
Well,
territory.
well, the thing is that birds. That's why birds have the beak they have. It's like that's why there's many birds that when they're flying around, they usually catch a bunch of worms just by the way their beak is shaped. It's not like humans where yeah, you have your mouth and it could work as storage, but you also have your teeth for mechanical breakdown.
Hmm.
So the bird a bird wouldn't be able to mechanically break down the seed unless it like grabs half of the seed with its beak and bites it, but it's not fully broken down as a human's jaw would. So
Yeah, like basically we're saying is that they don't have like molars, or
hmm
like they don't have any teeth at all to like cut or if not grind
yeah.
the seeds. They tend to eat stuff whole. Like I'm pretty sure you've seen like birds just grab fishes or worms and they'll just swallow them whole.
Yeah, and that's why. Well, the worms, it's very soft, and their enzymes could easily break down the worm. So
Hmm. And then depending on the chili, like too, like let's say if you get like a jalapeno, or if not like a if you compare them both, like let's say a jalapeno to a red pepper tends to like not be as like juicy. So it'll be like it'll be able to like process things differently too. And then well yeah, it's like the thing with like tigers, and I think there's oh yeah, like butterflies. Butterflies too, if you see, like they have like little crazy designs and all that stuff. And like some animals or insects tend to, like, if they look at a butterfly, they'll see eyes on the butterfly and they'll think it's a way bigger animal than what it actually is. And it's yeah, like it's a sort of like a survival trait too. So as like let's say if more of those animals don't die off, because yeah, a lot of, let's say, a lot of birds or anything that will prey on the butterflies, like if they think that they're a bigger thing, they're not going to be eating as much too. And I think there's is the same thing with like this green caterpillar too. This green caterpillar tends to have eyeballs too. I think it's basically the caterpillar that Caterpie from Pokemon. The Pokemon Caterpie is based on. They have eyeballs on the back of their heads too. So yeah, because they'll think that it's a bigger animal than what it actually is.
Yeah. 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 Right here, you can see like it has like not. It's not really actually eyes, but it looks like giant eyes,
Mm.
and it probably tricks other animals.
Yeah, it has a,
Also, I've heard about this caterpillar that creates cocoons, like when it's changing into a butterfly. It makes cocoons that look like a snake, and it scares other animals, so they probably won't try to destroy the cocoon.
And the thing is that most animals, they're once they're born, they're already they're born with that fear and just yeah that fear that snakes are dangerous. It's like many species of monkeys, how they're very afraid of monkeys, and they're very afraid of snakes. And
mm-hmm.
like I've seen many studies where they've put a I don't remember exactly what monkeys are there, but I think it was a rhesus monkey, and they I guess they put it with different objects, and I think one of them was a snake, and the like a I think that they put it with like a toy or something, and the other one was a snake, and once it saw the snake, it became like it was just afraid.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't know what to do, so
Yeah, like it's basically I think it'll be, I'm not sure what exactly it is, but what I'm thinking it might be like genetically is bred into them to be afraid. It's like how we're afraid, like it's like how some of us are afraid of heights when we've never fallen from something that high.
what's like I think also because since their habitat is around trees,
Mm-hmm.
so I mean snakes tend to be on trees a lot, so
And then like yeah, like it's with the experience too. Like let's say like some of us might not learn like that stuff is dangerous, or we don't see it as dangerous. Like let's say as a little kid, you get burned on the stove. Like I'm pretty sure the first time like you get burned, you're gonna learn. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't touch that at all.
Yeah, and then later you like once you have kids, you'll tell them, oh, you shouldn't touch the stove because it'll burn you.
Mm-hmm. Or if not, like you might pass you might pass like past drama to them. It's like the same thing with like I know that there's this like I think the documentary where like let's say like yeah like the Jews that were inside the concentration camp, like they went through a lot of trauma, and basically their kids were born with like sort of like the same like chemical imbalance at somebody that went through the concentration camp had too. So like basically it was just like one generation down still had that sort of like that trauma like build into them.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's just like how like if you're anemic, you could pass it on to your
well,
kids or something.
them it was very common for their offspring, their future children, to have to be born with diabetes. There was a higher population of people with diabetes and heart disease and other cardiovascular issues because when they were in the concentration camps, there was a lot of stress they experienced
Mm-hmm.
and anxiety, so that produced a lot of cortisol. So that cortisol it it messed it just messed with their cardiovascular system. So that's why when they had children, they passed on diabetes and maybe a higher incidence of plaque building in their arteries. So
Mm-hmm.
it was just a genetic trait they passed on to their children.
Yeah, and it's not that it's like something that was passed on through many years. It's just basically like yeah, it was just something that was pretty recent, like, and that was passed on to like your next generation.
Oh,
So like you see how like your body tends to adapt and change, like I don't know, change you genetically, and like your offspring too. Like you'll pass it on to the offspring, even though if you experienced it, like let's say 70 years ago, or before they were born.
and And also we've seen stuff like this happen, like people favoring the traits of certain animals, and they breed them so they could have the same traits or have them more exaggerated. And we also like a very common example of this is dogs. Like we see dogs from like, for example, we see a pug from like the 19,000s and we 1900s, and they had longer snouts. And you look at the pugs from today, and they have flatter snouts.
Hmm. And then like if you see, like yeah, we breed in certain traits into animals, but it actually causes more harm to them too. Because like yeah, like they have a shorter snout. That means that they would have problems breathing too. That's why if you see like pugs, French bulldogs, and like all those animals, they tend to fart a lot too because they breathe into their mouth instead of their nose because it's more difficult through their nose.
Yeah. And then we also see that pugs have less endurance than other dogs with longer snouts, because they also can't breathe as well as them, because they also have the shorter snouts.
And then
I think the do pugs have do they have two airways? So like their nose, because I know there's some animals that have their nose closed up, and that's just one single airway, and also their mouth. And there's some animals that have an opening between both their mouth and their nose.
Well, they're still very similar to dogs, just that their skulls are shaped differently.
mm-hmm.
And also, a lot of people bred pugs, so they could have curlier tails, but we also found out that could later cause other spinal health issues. Like, there's a lot of pictures of pugs from the 1900s that had like longer snouts.
So like yeah, it's basically for our own like greedy like purposes that we'll breed in trades knowing that there's gonna be a worse outcome for for that animal. Like the animal is gonna live much shorter, but since we want that trade, like of course we'll breed it in there because it makes more money, and you could sort of sell that like breed to like any consumer because they're not gonna be as informed as you will. But like since I don't know, like let's say since you're like greedy and you want to make more money, of course you're gonna like shorten that animal's life just to get like a couple bucks more because it has more of a unique trait. I think it's like the same thing with snakes too. There's this snake I think is a like they breed in this I think it's called the spider web, a python or something, where basically like they breed in this like this pattern onto the snake, but it causes like the way that they breed it, it causes the snake to have like mental issues. So it won't be able to know from like the difference between from up to down to left to right. So like let's say if it sees a rat right in front of them, if it sees a rat right in front of them, instead of going towards it, even though if it's in front of it, it'll go to the side and probably hit the window, or if not, like they tend to get injured because they don't really know like their directions. So you'll see them like fall off of like tall places
Well, also
and get injured.
it depends where their eyes are set. So like if you have a creature who has their eyes on the side, their their peripheral vision is going to be very efficient. But if you have a creature who has their eyes in front, it's going to be more their what they're saying in front of them. Snakes, of course, if you're going around and your eyes are only on the side of your head, you're not really gonna be able to see what's coming in front of you.
No, but like it's just they're born with like mental issues. like
Yeah.
because they breed in that specific thing that, let's say, their sense of direction is not there.
Yeah, and also bulldogs they're pretty normal dogs. Like they're mainly work dogs, and they had like an average dog lifespan,
Hmm.
and they also had a more muscular body. Now they have more wrinkles, and they're born with more fat. So that could also lead to a shorter lifespan, and this is all because well, humans selectively bred them
Hmm.
for specific traits.
Or not, like, I think there's some dogs. I think it's I forget what exactly they're called, but they look like bulldogs. They look like bulldogs, and like they bred them to have like shorter hind legs or back legs, and like it tends to cause like I think hip issues and all that stuff too, because it's just the difference between, like, you see their front paws, they're way longer, they're way longer than their back ones, so they're not as efficient as like they would if like they had, like, I don't know, like an average or normal like leg length.
Uh, Also, what I've seen is that the German Shepherd. It's also another example that they bred them to have like a sort of like a sloped back, and then that could lead to like a hip dysplasia, which is like very painful,
Hmm.
and it's very common with German Shepherd breeds.
Yeah, so I think there's I think there's this thing too where some dogs tend to be born with like a shorter spine. I don't know if like that's pretty much the same thing with the German Shepherd too.
I'm saying that could happen with like any dog. I think it's like just like a it
It's a
just
disorder.
it's, they're usually born with it, so I think it's more like a sort of mutation that happens when they're born. Yeah, because they're always born like that. I don't think it's something that develops once when they get older. But yeah, I've seen that in many videos. There's dogs that are born with that short spine syndrome.
Hmm. Like, yeah, like it's sad, but it looks like if somebody like basically added a filter to like a picture of a dog, and basically just shorten like the dog.
Yeah, but um, I guess yeah, they can see there's they're born with shorter spines. Then and it might be painful because I mean
Yeah, like basically it makes them look like goblins. It looks like they're like squash. Like it looks like their back legs and their front legs are like way more closer than they have to be. And then I think it looks like if their heads are like sort of pushed in into their front legs too.
yeah, because like their whole spine is like much shorter. Well, the I guess the good thing is that usually people tend to adopt more unique dogs, and the good thing is that most of them actually get adopted.
Hmm. Yeah, there's that thing too. Like people tend to adopt, like, yeah, like they tend to adopt unique things like that. The grumpy cat. Like, I don't know that meme. I don't know if it's a meme, but that cat. I think it had sort of like it had this like a disorder or something that made it look like if it was grumpy all the time. And like, yeah, like if you see, like, it was so unique that it became popular in the internet. And yeah, well, like the good thing is, yeah, people do want unique things, and like it'll help the animal survive much longer, instead of like, oh, I'm like, why does it look like that? I don't want it, and they don't adopt it anymore.
And also, I've seen that people there's been many cases like there's been like obese cats that they find in shelters, and a lot of people adopt them because they think they look nice and they're unique. They stand out from the other animals too.
Mm-hmm. He's like, yeah, like he's pretty much like the same thing with the peacocks. Like, I don't know, like let's say like the more elaborate let's say pattern, or the more feathers that they have, the better like the outcome of mating with other peacocks. It'll be like the outcome will be way better than if they didn't have like that, like a more elaborate like feather arrangement.
Yeah. Well, what else do you guys have to say about evolution?
I don't know, it's like there's perks to it, and of course there's like stuff that affects them too.
Well, we also seen that it had some negative effects too, cause like we see pandas.
Yeah, well,
They're basically bears, and they evolved to only exclusively, some of them exclusively eat only bamboo.
well, I've heard that there's many zoologists and ecologists who have the fear that pandas might that one of the issues is that they might go extinct because for the reason that they have to consume different various species of plants, and since they're big animals, in order to carry all that weight, they need a higher consumption of calories, and if they're just eating bamboo, they're not going to get sufficient calories, so they have to consume fruits and all these other sources of food in order to sustain their body weight and their work. Because and like also like there's a problem that pandas don't really efficiently digest all the bamboo.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I also heard that some of them actually kill some of their offspring, and they let the strongest one live because they can't supply their offspring with enough milk to sustain all of them.
Well, they can't produce as much, and I was reading up on it, and it was I saw that supposedly it was because their umami taste bud was like through evolution it was shut down, so that's why they like if they would eat meat. I've seen studies where they fed meat to pandas, and they don't like it. It doesn't taste the same as them eating bamboo.
Yeah. Also, I've seen that people are sort of trying to change this problem by like raising them with bears, the other bear species.
So like basically they're trying to breed in like some bear traits into them, or
just, like they're not like breeding. They just raise them along with bears. So
so like if they see like a bear eating something different, then
yeah,
they might be tempted to try it out too.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that you'd have to readapt them to eating meat in order for that trait to be reactivated. In order for that taste bud to be reactivated, because the thing is that before this whole inactivation of the umami taste bud happened, the panda was able to eat meat, but once it inactivated, it just stopped eating meat. I don't know if it was because lack of food, lack of prey, that they slowly began to stop eating meat, and that their body saw that since they weren't consuming a lot of meat, they don't need to keep that umami taste bud activated. So And I mean, it's weird how through evolution, it's sort of it basically
It,
downgraded their efficiency and survival.
mm-hmm. So they basically like instead of evolving so you
So it could
could
be a more fit and like
more efficient, like they became like more like the traits like that were developed more were like the more useless ones.
hmm. And if you see, there's a lot of issues with their cognition. So like they're always committing more like errors, like rolling over their offspring,
Mm-hmm.
or like just like out of nowhere, just getting scared by by a noise they should be accustomed to of their offspring. So it's just yeah, it seems like there's an association between their cognition and their choice of diet.
And like if you see they're I think they're not great at breeding too. They're like it's very hard for them to actually have a kid. I think it's the same thing with I think like the white rhinos, right? The white
Yeah.
rhinos are trying like they have them in they have some in captivity, and they're trying to breed them because there's only a few in the world. Probably like, you could count how many there are.
And also, if you see, they would have a lot of trouble if like. Well, also, I'm not so sure how their environment is, but it seems like their habitat is seems to be a very calm one. Maybe like high up in the hills where there really isn't many predators. So at the same time, they really wouldn't know how to react in a situation where there's a lot of stress and they're supposed to survive. They're supposed to know how to react towards being approached by a predator. So
And there's a lot of animals that are endangered also because they have some traits that don't benefit them at all, and sometimes they hinder their ability to survive in the wild.
Mm-hmm.
what's like we also see. I don't know exactly what's um, the problem, but with cheetahs, how they're they're breeding with what like it's very close relatives, right? And there's less diversity in their genes, so they're developing many diseases, and they're contracting many diseases for the reason that there's not a lot of variation in their genes. There's not a lot of difference. So
I think it's yeah, like I think it's the same thing with the bananas. Like they're sort of having a problem with bananas. Like I don't know what specific like I don't know like species of bananas. I don't know if you could call it like that. Like a specific species of banana. Like basically, they're being threatened that like there's this new like disease, or it's been going on for a while. There's this disease that basically kills off all the banana plantations, and since basically they've basically cloned all the bananas that we ever eat, and of course since there's not much like genetic diversity in bananas too, like it's starting to kill off. So like now they're trying to now like banana plantations are trying to introduce different like species of bananas, or like diversifying them a little bit more. So yeah, so they won't get like wiped out, because yeah, probably in the future we might not have bananas, because yeah, because just we just we just bred this specific banana for this certain taste.
And and also there's this bird. I think you've seen it also. It's like it looks like a basically it looks like a fat parrot. It's called a kakapo bird, and um basically it's a parrot that evolved into having into being flightless, and and it can't really escape from much predators. And the predators that live in its habitat are mostly like weasels and like cats and feral dogs.
So they tend to be pretty fast.
Yeah, they tend to be pretty fast, and this bird has like massive thighs and like long and big legs, and it can't really. It's also very big, so it can't really run as fast as those animals, and a lot of them get eaten.
Yeah, so basically that bird just has like inefficient traits. But then there's other animals, like if you see sharks, like they say that sharks haven't like really like evolved as much or hasn't changed as much from like when they were first being like when they were first came to like I don't know
Existence.
living. Yeah, when they came to existence. They haven't changed as much because they don't really need to.
I know they've lived even before dinosaurs even lived, and like also crocodiles also. They've stayed the same for millions of years.
Yeah, and then like if you see, there's really no reason for them to change because yeah, of course they're basically at the top of the food chain.
Yeah.
Like they don't like nothing can really compete with them like unless you have dolphins.
Yeah, and then also no, I think right here in the United States, I don't think there's really anything that like hunts down alligators, cause like they're basically like the apex predator of their habitat.
I don't know, like in Florida or all those other swampy areas.
Yeah, they're basically like the biggest animal in Florida.
Yeah, because like I think we're like in Florida, they're having a problem with them too, right?
Yeah, sometimes they go out to the cities and.
Well, they also have problems with giant pythons. There's many pictures and there's many cases of giant pythons eating crocodiles, swallowing crocodiles.
No, but also because they weren't really meant to be there.
Yeah.
That python is an invasive species.
Yeah.
So like basically somebody came and introduced them there. Like they brought them there like probably as pets and they got too big. So they're like, oh man, I can't keep this in my house. I guess I'll just dump it in this lake.
Yeah, that's basically the ideal habitat for them. So, and they thrive right there. Okay. I think this is the end of the podcast.
Yeah, well, thanks for watching.